Now let's talk about management versus governance. And it's not going to be a terribly big topic, but I think it is important to understand how things work in your organization, who does the policies, the procedures, who has the vision, and where you fit into all of that. And here it's important to remember that all of us come into certification studying from different perspectives. We have different backgrounds, we have different knowledge, and the organizations where we're used to doing things in are very different. And I say this because you need to answer things on the exam from the point of view that the exam wants and not the one you may be used to. This is an ISC2 exam. You need to answer the questions in a way that they want you to. So our governance is senior leadership. That is the board of directors, it's the owner of the organization, it's the stakeholders. Those are the people that set the direction. They make the vision, they figure out our mission for the entire organization. They decide on the policies, and then the management team translates that into the standards that we need to adhere to, and the policies, our guidelines, our procedures, and our baselines. And you might here have noticed that I say both senior management decides on the policies and management makes them, because that's really how it is. Senior management doesn't have the knowledge to actually always build the policies, but the directors, the managers, they most often do. But the key word here, and this is one of the things you need to train yourself for the exam, I said decide. So management actually creates the policies and then senior management approves them, just like with our risk management. We give them the recommendations and they then choose to act on them or change something or completely reject them. And we need that very clear two-way communication between the leadership team and the management team. Because the leadership team needs to clearly understand the risk, opportunities, and impacts of the direction they have chosen. Management explains it to them, governance sets the direction, we need to go in that direction, and then management needs to figure out how do we get from where we are now to the desired goal. Think of it like someone saying, I want you to go to California. Well then, depending on where you are, you need to figure out how to get there. They set the direction, management figures out how to get there. And as we go along that path, there needs to be that two-way communication I talked about so we can make sure that what they told us was actually what we heard and what we're trying to do. This is just like risk management. We have the monitoring and control phase. Yes, we're still going in that direction. Yes, this is what we wanted. The controls are working. We also talked about how senior management determine our risk appetite. Are we risk aggressive? Are we risk adverse? Or somewhere in between there? Regardless of which approach we choose, it will present unique opportunities and unique threats. If we choose to be bleeding edge risk aggressive, well, that's going to bring us a lot of opportunity, but it will most likely also bring us a lot of risk. In some companies, that would make a lot of sense. In others, it would be a horrible decision. Regardless of what our organization does, senior management is governance. They set the direction. Management then plans, builds, and run and monitor the activities that is needed for the organization to align with the direction that the governance body has set. There are also a handful of titles that I would know for the exam and really also for your job. Because if you know what that position does, well then you're going to have an easier time answering the questions. So if you look at the image over here on the right, you can see we have a CEO. That is the Chief Executive Officer. Above them, we might have a board of directors. And maybe above the board of directors, we could have shareholders. But for simplicity, let's just use it like it is. The CEO is the leader of the organization. They can also sometimes be referred to as the president. Below the president, we have the vice presidents. And in most large organizations, there would be more than these. The ones I have here are the most common ones and the ones I think you need for the exam. So over the IT organization, we would normally have a CIO or a CTO. Chief Information Officer or Chief Technology Officer. Now, in the real world, in most cases, the Chief Security Officer or Chief Information Security Officer is below the CIO, but it shouldn't be that way. And while it makes logical sense that the Chief Information Security Officer is under the IT organization, they really shouldn't be. They should report directly to the CEO, or at least to the IT Steering Committee. And the reason for that is we don't want the CTO or the CIO to have too much influence over the security team and not allow the security team to be as efficient and as effective as we need to be. We need to make sure that all of IT, just like the rest of the organization, have the proper security profile we need, no favors are being played. And then going back to who is ultimately liable, in this case it would most likely be the CEO and the C-suite. And it's called the C-suite because they have the C's in the name. Chief Technology Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Information Security Officer. So they would be ultimately liable if something went wrong. Of course, here again, it doesn't mean you're not liable. They are just ultimate. And maybe the only other title you probably need for the exam is the CFO, Chief Financial Officer. They make sure that what we do is financially viable. This is where our risk implementations are based on a positive ROI, and for most large transactions, it's the CFO that signs off on it. So to recap, in this lecture, we talked about the differences between governance and management. And governance is senior leadership. It's the board of directors, our stakeholders. They have the vision, they set our mission, they provide us with the direction that the company needs to go in. They approve the policies. And keyword here is approve. Management normally makes the policies, senior management approves them. Senior management sets our risk appetite. That is where we can be risk averse, we try to avoid risks, or we can be risk aggressive. Both come with unique opportunities and threats. And then management will take the directions that is set by senior leadership, and with that we'll build our plans, implement and monitor whatever we need to go in the right direction. And then finally, we talked about the different roles. At the top of the organization, we have the CEO or the president. Depending on our structure above him or her, we can have the board of directors and our shareholders. Below the CEO, we have the vice presidents or VPs. Over the IT organization, that would be our CIO or CTO, Chief Information or Chief Technology Officer. In the security side of things in IT, we would have a CISO or a CSO, Chief Information Security Officer or just Chief Security Officer. In the ideal world, we would want the security function to be under the CEO and not the CIO or CTO. And we do that because we want to make sure that no favors are being played for IT. They need to be treated for our security as any other part of the organization. And then the final role we had was the CFO. They're the person that makes sure that we are financially viable, which is why our risk assessments are based on a cost-benefit analysis. And with that, we are done with this lecture. I hope this has helped you get a better understanding of the differences between governance and management and what each of them do. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next lecture.